Hey everybody, do you like jokes involving the sexual exploitation of children? No? Well then you're probably not gonna like this saga very much. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Pilaf Saga of the Dragon Ball Retrospective. So our story begins, as it usually does, with the narrator giving exposition. Basically, the story starts in the wilderness where we meet Goku, a feral child. He's seen riding a log that he presumably just chopped down, but he's also carrying a saw for some reason that's never seen again outside of this one clip. Now, you would think that he used the saw to cut down the very log that he's riding on, but then again, in the very next scene, he chops the log into firewood with his bare hands. So, if he doesn't need an axe, why does he need a saw? So anyway, Goku prays to his orange ball, calling him Grandpa, and then talks out loud to his own stomach. Clearly, this kid has been out in the wilderness too long, if he's talking to his own stomach like it's a separate person. So anyway, he collects some apples from a tree and gets accosted by a saber-toothed tiger. He manages to outrun the tiger, but he ends up in the river, so he takes off his clothes and lets them dry. He then decides to use his tail to fish with. Once he catches the fish, he immediately jumps up and kicks it in the head, killing it. And this is where I need to stop and give my first tangent in a video full of long-ass tangents. When Goku catches the fish, he's completely naked. Since he's out in the wilderness all by himself, there's nothing wrong with that in universe. However, when he's kicking the fish, his dick and balls are clearly visible. Later on, Goku appears naked in Bulma's bathroom, and his dick and balls are once again clearly visible. Later on, we see him still naked even after he failed to retrieve a certain fish from the lake, more on that later, and again, his dick and balls are clearly visible. It's important to note that, in this saga, Goku is, canonically, 12 years old. This means that, in all of these instances, we are looking at a 12-year-old boy's crotch. Now, over in Japan, where this show was originally made, this isn't as big of a deal as it is here in the West. In Japan, frontal nudity for prepubescent boys is considered innocent. But once you reach your teen years, frontal nudity suddenly becomes pornographic in that country, which is why the last time in the original manga we see Goku's dick is in chapter 110, when he is still canonically 12 years old. But that chapter takes place just before a 3-year time skip, after which he'll be 15 years old and therefore no longer allowed to wave his cock around in public like a guy who isn't allowed within 50 yards of a school. Although we do still see his ass from time to time, and that's long after Goku has grown up, gotten married, and had a kid. My point is that, by Japanese standards, this is all fine. I'm not going to sit here and judge Japanese culture. After all, nearly all cultures' various treatments of nudity have historically been mostly subjective and arbitrary. For example, in Thailand, they'll censor even bare-chested men in Dragon Ball Z because, in Thai culture, bare-chested men are considered just as pornographic as topless women are in the West. Frankly, I didn't even care about that. It's their culture, not mine, so it's not my place to judge. Hell, as I mentioned a moment ago, the shame of nudity is such an inherently subjective, subject that you'd be shocked to hear just how extensive public nudity has historically been socially accepted. Here's a URL for an 8-minute TikTok that goes into a lot more detail about the history of nudity. I'll provide a clickable link in the description. However, In the West, seeing a 12-year-old boy's genitalia is actually worse than pornographic. Rather, it gives off serious child porn vibes, and child porn isn't just inappropriate for a kids show, it's downright illegal to have in any capacity. Because of this, back in 1995, when Funimation took its first crack at dubbing Dragon Ball in English, a dub which has since been known as the Saga of Goku, they made a few nominal efforts to cover the nudity up. In the 2 fishing incidents, they depicted Goku as wearing plain white briefs, and in the bathroom scene, they placed a stool to cover up Goku's shame. However, the originalist elitists cried foul. They were all like, no, we need the child porn in our Dragon Ball. The child porn is what makes it what it is. Why do I get the feeling that these people probably have a ton of extra CP on their computers? So, in the early 2000s, when Toonami had finally brought OG Dragon Ball to the US mainstream after the success of Dragon Ball Z, Toonami finally caved and gave us all the 12-year-old dick shots of the original. And frankly, that makes me sick. Can some of you originalist dickheads kindly explain to me in the comments why exactly it is so damn necessary for us to see Goku's dick in order for us to get the quote-unquote original experience? In the 2 fishing scenes, Goku's nudity isn't even the focus, so how does him wearing underwear somehow undermine the story? At least in the bathroom scene, Goku being naked is the whole joke, but even then, he only has to be naked in-universe for the joke to work. From my point of view, the joke still works just fine even if the stool is there. Think about it this way. Later in that very same episode, there's a joke involving Goku seeing Bulma's vagina and not recognizing that this is perfectly normal that girls have different genitals than boys. However, we see Goku slide the panties off Bulma's legs, but we never see her vagina ourselves. But we don't need to see it. The joke works just fine without us seeing it. She only has to be naked in-universe for the joke to work. Likewise, the stool in the bathroom scene doesn't kill the joke, because Goku is still naked in-universe. So why the fuck do the originalist elitists insist that Goku's dick and balls still need to be visible? Just because it was visible in the original? So fucking what? From Japan's point of view, our disgust at seeing prepubescent dicks is probably just as prudish from their point of view as Thailand's propensity for censoring bare-chested men is to us. And that's fine. Like I said, I will not judge other people's cultures, especially on a topic as subjective as the taboo on nudity. However, if you're going to bring a TV show into a new culture, one that doesn't share the original country's beliefs about nudity, is it really too much to ask for you to cover that shit up? Why is it abhorrent to conform as best as possible to the standards of decency of the culture you're importing into? Then again, I'm just a filthy dubtard, so what do I know? So anyway, as Goku is walking home with his fish in tow, Bulma runs into him. Literally. At first, they fight, but once cooler heads prevail, they start talking. It turns out that Goku has never seen a girl before. In fact, he's never seen any human except for his grandpa. Since Goku is a feral child, he doesn't understand that it's not polite to lift Bulma's skirt up, which is the first of many instances in this saga where Goku's naivety and lack of understanding of personal space and boundaries is played for laughs. So Goku agrees to host Bulma for a day. Bulma looks on her radar and realizes he's leading her straight to her destination. When they arrive at Goku's house, Bulma immediately recognizes the 4-star ball for what it is. She shows Goku that she already has 2 of the Dragon Balls and explains why she's collecting them. It turns out these Dragon Balls have the power to grant wishes as long as all 7 balls are brought together. Bulma asks that Goku relinquish the Dragon Ball. When he refuses, she tries to offer her body. We'll put a pin in that because I've already got one tangent coming up, and this will become relevant in another tangent fairly soon. But ultimately, Bulma convinces Goku to come along with her on the adventure. So, the Dragon Balls themselves, they're literally what the entire series is named after, so I'd be mad if I didn't have a section discussing them. Bear in mind that when Akira Toriyama started this series, his original intention was to end it after the first saga. This means that the Dragon Balls were never meant to be developed beyond this saga. They existed solely as a catalyst to motivate the main characters to go adventuring around the world. Different characters are going to want different things. Bulma wants a boyfriend, Yamcha wants to wish away his fear of women, and Pilaf wants to rule the world. These wishes are all very different from each other, especially Pilaf's wish compared to the other 2. So why would they all be trying to acquire the same things? The best way to justify them all having the same desire to collect the MacGuffins, despite them having such vastly different end goals, is to simply say that the MacGuffins grant wishes. This makes them universally valuable, regardless of what you actually want to do with them. Of course, these balls are supposed to be a catalyst to encourage the main characters to adventure all around the world. To facilitate this, Toriyama makes it so that in order to make your wish, all 7 Dragon Balls have to be brought together. Otherwise, the Dragon Balls are worthless. 5 balls doesn't count, 6.5 balls doesn't count. In a series where world building tends to be rewritten on a whim, that much has been consistent throughout the entire series.
You can't make a wish with just 1 ball, you have to have the others as well.
They probably summoned the dragon already!
But I've still got one.
Huh? Of course!
This collectible is only valuable as part of a complete set.
Calm down. They can gather all the balls they want. They can't use the power without all 7. We came here for the Dragon Balls, remember?
And we need all 7 balls, right?
Without all 7, they're useless. Which means, if I can find just one, Frieza won't be able to make his wish.
You got it! Gohan has just one of the Dragon Balls, then Vegeta can't make his wish!
The Dragon Balls are scattered all over. Destroy even one of them and we can wish nothing back.
It's never clarified exactly what the maximum distance is between each ball in order for them to be considered together, though. But that's ultimately a minor detail. But once all 7 Dragon Balls are together, whatever that means, the Dragon Balls themselves don't grant the wish. Instead, you have to call forth what's known as the Eternal Dragon. In the original Japanese story, this character was named Shenlong. This actually isn't a name at all, but a descriptor. It's Chinese, not Japanese. Shen is Chinese for God, and Long is Chinese for dragon. In the Harmony Gold dub, this was translated directly so that he was simply called Dragon God! However, the Funimation dub realized it was kinda weird to refer to this character as a god. The dragon part I can understand, but how is this character a god by any Western standard? He's more of a genie than anything else, and that's not just me being sentimental towards the West and its conservative Christian base not being comfortable with gods in their children's shows. After all, we teach the Greek pantheon in public schools. No, I mean, even by the most generous of Western standards of what constitutes a god, the Eternal Dragon doesn't fit any of those criteria. He never dishes out any divine punishments like Hades in Greek mythology or Enma in Buddhist mythology. He never oversees or governs any sections of the world like how Poseidon is god of the sea. Later on in the series, we eventually do meet characters who undeniably meet these criteria, but the Eternal Dragon doesn't. His role in the story is limited exclusively to that of a genie. Nothing more, nothing less. He rarely sticks around long enough to even have any more nuanced interactions, and even when they do, their dialogue is usually limited to just nagging the characters to hurry up and make a wish. So they probably wouldn't want to show any personality or character growth even if they had the chance. So when Funimation dubbed the show, they changed the God section of the Dragon's title to Eternal, an indirect reference to the fact that gods, at least in the West, tend to be portrayed as immortal without calling him a god directly. Later on in the series, he'll eventually be given an actual name, Shenron. While many think this is just a misspelling of Shenlong, and it probably is, it also serves to give the Eternal Dragon an actual name instead of just a self-descriptive title. Now, I did say that the Eternal Dragon's role in the story was that of a genie. However, surprisingly, unlike most other stories where genies are present, the Eternal Dragon almost never makes a monkey's paw out of the character's wishes. Instead, they tend to grant the wishes precisely as the wisher envisioned it. When a character wishes for a dead person to be brought back to life, that person isn't undead, but rather is truly alive. Later on in the series, when a character named Piccolo wishes for his youth to be restored, the dragon doesn't reduce him to an infant, but rather he appears in his prime. There was only one time in the original series where a Dragon Ball wish actually resulted in a monkey's paw, which I'll discuss when we reach that point in the series, and there's actually a potential theory to explain why that is. Also, when the Dragon Balls are finally used, they're scattered across the world to random spots on the planet, forcing people to restart their adventure to collect the Dragon Balls all over again. Of course, this makes sense because to do otherwise would undermine the whole point of requiring the main characters to have to collect them. You might as well just have one Dragon Ball at that point. However, I do take umbrage with what a lot of people say about Bulma's interaction with Goku. To quote Mr. Fusion,
she finally convinces him to come along with her with the promise of adventure, while lying to him that he'll be able to keep his Dragon Ball, as it turns out that they fly to the ends of the earth once used.
I disagree. Maybe in the original Japanese manga that was the case, but in the English version of the manga, Bulma explains during her exposition about how the Dragon Balls work that they're scattered after a wish is made. So when Goku agrees to come along, he obviously knows about that little caveat. Moreover, instead of insisting that he keep his grandpa's Dragon Ball, he only insists that he be allowed to hold on to it. This implies that Goku was planning on jumping up to grab the 4-star ball all along, just like he does after the second wish, and he only doesn't do that in this saga because he was trapped. So Goku and Bulma team up. Bulma unveils what she refers to as Dino Caps. This will be the name for these things for a while, but after a while, the name will inexplicably switch to capsules. They're downright futuristic technology that enables you to carry just about anything of any size in a tiny little capsule. This is an interesting opportunity to provide a crash course on how to show rather than tell when it comes to world building. With the Dragon Balls themselves, they don't actually get used until the climax of the Pilaf Saga, so in order to understand what they do and why Bulma and Pilaf are hunting them down, we have to rely on raw exposition. However, it's generally a bad idea to simply vomit exposition onto the screen like that, since it's rather boring. Since we've basically depleted the audience's tolerance for raw, boring-ass exposition, it's best if we move on to a form of exposition that isn't just vomiting dialogue onto the screen. Instead, Bulma shows us how Dino Caps work through the simple expedient of using them. We see that you activate the Dino Caps by pressing a button on the top, which starts a timer. You then throw the Dino Cap, and poof, instant motorcycle that you could never have carried in your pocket without the Dino Cap technology. The only thing that's explicitly told to us is Bulma explaining that this is standard technology where she comes from. But we get a good handle on how Dino Caps work just by seeing them in action. Anyway, Bulma gets kidnapped by a talking dinosaur, and so it's up to Goku to rescue her, which he does using his staff. Turns out this staff isn't just any ordinary wooden pole, it's a power pole, and has the ability to extend on Goku's command. Goku uses that to great effect when he whacks the dinosaur upside the head with it. Also, in the original Japanese version, this weapon is called the Noebo, which is Japanese for slave staff. As the sun sets, Bulma decides to set up camp using a dino cap that contains an entire house. Once inside and away from the smells of the outdoors, Bulma finally realizes that Goku smells and demands he take a bath. Goku doesn't know what a bath is, so Bulma is forced to show him, leading to the aforementioned joke of Goku not understanding that his own nudity might make others uncomfortable. However, there are two moments that I need to talk about. First, when Bulma moves to scrub Goku's back, Goku uses his tail to scrub his own back. This causes Bulma to realize that the tail is actually real, and she freaks out. Later on, he explains to Bulma that he never knew his parents, and that his grandpa isn't even his biological grandpa. Instead, Gohan found Goku in the middle of nowhere and adopted him. Those two events are in the original Japanese version of this show. Funimation also adds a line where Bulma says, "I don't know what planet this kid's from, but it's not Earth." However, the original Japanese had Bulma merely saying that it was rude for Goku to fall asleep while talking to people, so it doesn't count for purposes of this discussion. Now, if I could fast forward for a bit, it will eventually be revealed, way later down the line, that Goku is in fact an alien, and that he was sent to Earth to destroy it. However, one of the most controversial topics of the entire series is the fact that Toriyama insists that this isn't something he had planned from the beginning. So it is a topic of hot debate exactly when he actually decided to make Goku an alien. Toriyama has never stated exactly when he came to that decision, or even when he started contemplating it, and since Toriyama is now dead, we'll never know for sure. Because of this, a lot of fans insist that Goku explaining that his grandpa found him in the wilderness and adopted him is, in fact, not intentionally foreshadowing that Goku is an alien. It certainly helps to bolster the later reveal, and it helps to avoid any outright plot holes in this regard. But Toriyama at the time wasn't intentionally thinking of Goku as an alien at the time he wrote this. However, I disagree, and my main argument for this is Bulma's reaction to Goku's tail. For the two of you who are watching this retrospective without ever having seen the show before, just know that Goku's tail is a part of his anatomy that will eventually connect him to his alien race. Consider for a minute the fact that this world is extraordinarily alien to us, the audience. The Dino Caps alone make it a very different world than ours, but it also has dinosaurs that talk, turtles that talk, shape-shifting anthropomorphic talking pigs, owls that wear police caps, and just about anything else your imagination can come up with. Hell, even the Dragon Balls themselves are treated as not that out of place in this world. Sure, very few people know about them, but whenever Goku explains the Dragon Balls to anyone else, nobody is in utter disbelief that such artifacts can actually exist. Everyone just accepts their existence with ease. When you think about it that way, the idea that a boy might actually have a fully functional monkey-like tail which he can use as a separate, fully operational arm honestly feels like small potatoes at that point, don't you think? And yet, Bulma's reaction to it compels us, the audience, to accept that in a world packed to the brim with this much fantastical stuff in it, this is the one thing that, even by this world's standards, is abnormal. And what a coinkydink, it also just happens to be the one part of Goku's anatomy that connects him to his alien race. Coincidence? I think not. Contrast that with Dragon Ball's prototype manga, Dragon Boy. In that manga, Tang Tong is revealed to have a pair of dragon wings under his clothes. However, Princess Ka doesn't freak out at this reveal. To the contrary, she's more annoyed that he didn't whip them out sooner. Now, some of you right now are insisting that this is unintentional, that it's just as much of a coincidence as Goku explaining that he was found by Gohan as a baby. However, your evidence for this is merely the fact that Toriyama has explicitly stated that he didn't plan for Goku to be an alien from the start. However, it's important to keep in mind that all he ever explicitly said was that it wasn't something he had planned from the beginning. In order for that to be true, all that is necessary is that the very first manga chapter must have been published by the time he got the idea for Goku to be an alien. This means that it could have been as early as this episode when Toriyama at a minimum started playing around with the idea that he'll be an alien. So anyway, they sleep. Goku wakes up and does the aforementioned joke where he doesn't recognize what a vagina looks like. Goku goes outside to do some exercises where he meets a talking turtle. It turns out that the turtle is lost. He says he's been lost for a year, but when Bulma calculates how far away the sea is, he says it'll take him 20 years to get there. Now, I get what Toriyama's going for here. Turtles are supposed to be slow, and his inability to reach the sea in a reasonable amount of time is necessary to the story because it's what compels Goku to offer to lend a hand. But I have to wonder how it's even possible that the turtle can be a 20-year walk from the sea when he's only been lost for 1 year. Was he significantly faster on land a year ago or something? Well, discarding the finer details of the turtle's predicament, the important thing is that he can't reach the sea on his own in a reasonable amount of time, and so Goku offers to rectify that. Bulma objects, saying that they have their own adventure to keep up. Of course, Goku shows just how much of a hypocrite she is with this line.
I'm impossible? What do you mean by that?
Well, if we're so pressed for time, why did you just spend the whole morning in front of the mirror worrying about your hair?
You can't really argue with that logic, which is why Bulma doesn't try to, and instead lets Goku take the turtle to the sea. At first, she contemplates her and Goku going their separate ways, but then she realizes that Goku still has the 4-star Dragon Ball, so she has no choice but to accompany him. Or at least that's what it is in the Japanese version. In one of the rare instances where I have to admit the Funimation dub made a change for the worse, Bulma only chases after Goku after getting spooked by a roaming dinosaur. The implication there seems to be that she's afraid of the beasts in the wilderness and realizes that she needs Goku to protect her. But then again, that just makes you wonder why she embarked on this journey in the first place if she didn't have a means of protection before meeting Goku. She's only known Goku for less than 24 hours at this point, and she's already acquired 2 Dragon Balls, which she got entirely on her own. She totally doesn't need Goku to protect her, not if her prior results are any indication, but she does need his Dragon Ball. So I do have to admit that the Japanese version gives her a much more organic reason for why she is forced to tag along. Anyway, they get stopped by a giant bear that wants to eat the turtle. Bulma wants to relinquish the turtle immediately, but Goku is having none of it. Of course, in the first episode, we see him toy with a saber-toothed tiger, so he's probably used to such aggressive predators. Goku effortlessly defeats the bear with one well-placed punch. It's unclear if the bear is dead or just knocked out. We never see him again, but that doesn't mean anything. The narrative importance of this fight is that it establishes just how strong Goku is. With the dinosaur, it was his power pole that did all the work. You could make the argument that because the pole extended to a great length, the amount of torque applied to the pole was correspondingly greater. Meanwhile, Goku has been shown to be strong. He chops wood with his bare hands, but that's only a chore. He's able to lift a car over his head and judo throw it, but that's more brute strength than anything else. This fight is the first time we see that Goku not only is trained to fight, but he can get the job done with his bare hands. So they reach the sea, and the turtle asks them to wait while he goes and fetches something he'd like to give them as a token of his gratitude. He returns with Master Roshi on his back. As a reward for returning his pet turtle, Master Roshi gives Goku the flying Nimbus, a flying cloud. However, there's a catch. This cloud will only allow people on it who are pure of heart. Now, this is a fairly vague concept. What exactly does it mean to be pure of heart? Everyone seems to assume that this must mean there's no evil in Goku, but that isn't explicitly stated. After all, later in the series, Goku will be confronted with a technique called the Devil Might Beam, which targets any negative thoughts in a person's heart. Everyone present knows that Goku can ride the flying Nimbus, which requires he be pure of heart, yet nobody connects the dots that this also means he'll be immune from the Devil Might Beam. First of all, what exactly does it mean for anything to be pure? Remember that words can have multiple definitions. In 2015, Toriyama gave an interview where he discussed Goku's character. In it, he famously said, "I wanted him to have the sense of being that rare guy who seeks only to become stronger than before, so much so that it feels like there is no one as pure as this person." And while he does end up saving everyone as a result of that, he himself, at least, has a very pure sincerity about wanting to become stronger. What I wanted to depict the most was the sense that he might not be a good guy at all, although he does do good things as a result. From this, one could make the argument that Toriyama is using a word that translates into English as pure, but only in the sense that we, in English, might say pure water. That is to say, if there's anything else in the water, anything at all, even if it's good for you, it still isn't pure water. So how would that apply to the flying Nimbus? It's eventually revealed that the reason Master Roshi can't ride the cloud is because he's a bit of a pervert. However, is the reason he can't ride the Nimbus because his perviness is inherently sinful? Or is it because it's literally anything at all other than him sticking to his hermit lifestyle? Perhaps Master Roshi could have taken an interest in video games, which isn't inherently sinful, and the Nimbus still wouldn't have let him on it because, as morally neutral as that hobby is, it still taints the purity of his hermit lifestyle. I went to Google Translate and I translated the word pure from English to Japanese, and oh boy, I got a ton of different Japanese words that all mean pure in English. While some of these Japanese words have synonyms such as just, right, and noble, other words have synonyms such as unmixed, unprocessed, and undiluted. I don't speak Japanese, so I'd like someone who does to post in the comments and tell me exactly which Japanese word for pure is used in the manga. And not just in this context, but in every other context where purity of heart is a relevant factor, including the Devil Might Beam, becoming a Guardian, the Spirit Bomb, and turning Super Saiyan. I look forward to seeing your comments. So, Bulma asks for a gift too, even insisting that she gave the turtle some salt water when he was thirsty to advocate for why she should get one. Roshi agrees to give her something, but on the condition that he gets to see her underwear. This is where I get back to that pin I mentioned earlier. A lot of people seem to criticize Bulma's character, pointing out that she's all too willing to trade on her sexuality in order to get favors. This, in turn, makes her an overall terrible person. Frankly, I just don't see it. Bulma's propensity for trading on her sexuality never extends beyond this one saga, and even in this one saga, she only does it precisely 3 times and never again, and only one of those 3 times was actually her idea. So you might ask, if this isn't a core part of her character, why is she doing it even in this saga? Well, I'll start with this scene, since it's the one we're on at the moment. It is true that Bulma agrees to flash Roshi before even knowing exactly what she'll get. But she still knew that Roshi had some absolutely splendid gifts to give out. Think about it this way. Let's say you're a straight man. Obviously, you would never sleep with another guy, because that's just not who you are, and you certainly are no prostitute. But would you have gay sex with a man in exchange for $10 billion? My guess is that no matter how strict your moral code, you would be heavily tempted to break it just this once for such a grand reward. Now sure, in that scenario, you do know exactly what you'll get for breaking your morals, but the point remains that Bulma is trading on her sexuality for an admittedly ill-defined reward, but a reward that would absolutely be a life changer, whatever it is. So, in the time when she offers to let Goku feel her up, I can answer that at the same time I actually explain her intended wish from the Dragon Balls. She wants to wish for a wonderful boyfriend. One may wonder why she needs the Dragon Balls to do that, when she could literally have her pick of men. Mr. Fusion speculates that this boyfriend she wishes for will likely be
a magically created boy toy to do her bidding.
But if she wanted that, why then does she abandon that wish at the end of this saga? Yamcha is far from a brainless yes-man who will do her every beck and call. Well, if I could fast forward in the series for a little bit, later on in the Red Ribbon Army saga, Bulma gives us a slightly more detailed description of what kind of boyfriend she wants.
I'm going to collect the Dragon Balls and ask the dragon for a man who doesn't lie and cheat and who doesn't have a fan club.
Now, obviously, Bulma had completely misread the situation, but that little misunderstanding aside, wanting a boyfriend who doesn't lie or cheat is absolutely reasonable. So, why does Bulma feel like she needs the Dragon Balls to find love? My personal interpretation is that she fully believes in the stereotype that men only want one thing. So she offers that to Goku because she assumes, as a boy, that's all Goku really cares about. Not because it's her preferred currency, but because she assumes it's men's preferred currency. To be fair, her interactions with the vast majority of men in this series, from Master Roshi to Oolong to even the 2 Red Ribbon Army soldiers on the island, consistently seem to reassure her belief in this stereotype. Even her own dad assumes that the only reason Bulma would have a male guest over is so she can make out with him. Of course, I don't think she believes this stereotype to be absolute. I'm sure she's convinced that there are some good men out there. But at the same time, she's probably fed up to Hiffle and back, actually searching for a good man. I know I'm fed up searching for a good woman. If the Dragon Balls existed in the real world and I got the chance to make a wish, I myself would probably wish, if not for my ideal soulmate, then at least for the Eternal Dragon to tell me who and where my soulmate actually is so I can go find her. It'd be a hell of a lot easier than swiping endlessly on these damn dating apps. So Bulma thinks she's flashing her underwear, but she ends up giving Roshi a full flash because Goku took her underwear off when she was asleep. So she gets the 3-star Dragon Ball. The duo come up to a village. Bulma's radar says that the Dragon Ball is in the village, but when they arrive there, it appears deserted. Goku punches a hole in the door, taking out the doorknob. Bulma points out that he didn't even check to see if the door was locked, but since Goku's a feral child at this point in the series, I'll let it slide. As they open the door, an axe comes down and clocks Goku in the head. He explains that he was expecting Oolong. The duo learn that Oolong is a shapeshifter who uses his power to terrorize the village and is taking their girls and marrying them. Apparently, the axe-wielder's daughter was next on the list of girls to be taken. Oolong's shape-shifting power is treated as a great mystery, and the people of this village are truly terrified of Oolong because they don't understand the powers or its limitations, even though it's eventually revealed that he attended the Shape-Shifting Academy, which means it should be a well-known power in this world. Strangely enough, the villagers have a wide assortment of accents in the English dub, which is weird since people who live isolated in a village like this tend to develop the same accents. They even have a North American Indian amongst them, even though there's no indication that he adheres to Native American customs outside of his accent and his manner of dress. Later, we'll meet a duo of Native Americans who not only look the part, but actually adhere to a lot of Native American stereotypes, like being one with nature and living in a teepee. So some old woman reveals that she has the Dragon Ball they're looking for, so Bulma offers to rid the village of Oolong and get the girls back in exchange for it. And so a plan is devised where Goku will pose as the daughter and take her place. Once he's found where Oolong is keeping the girls, he can beat Oolong up and force him to relinquish the girls. Goku dresses up in the daughter's clothes, and somehow, despite only learning 2 days ago what a girl even was, he instantly knows he doesn't like cross-dressing. Weird. So Oolong shows up and smashes right through the village sign with his bare head and doesn't even flinch. Keep that in mind because it's going to create a plot hole very, very soon. At first, Oolong doesn't quite catch on that this isn't actually the girl he came for. Goku, despite being a feral child most of his life, still seems to catch on that the flowers are supposed to be romantic and plays along accordingly, even though there's no reason why his grandpa would teach him that aspect of civilized life before teaching him that it's not polite to touch people's crotches. But eventually Oolong sees Goku pissing while standing up, and the jig is up. Although we never learn if Goku needs 2 hands to hold it or not. Anyway, the jig is up, and so Oolong transforms into a bull, complete with a pseudo-Mexican accent. Goku draws his power pole and is ready for some action. Oolong, however, spends an awkward amount of time talking smack, foreshadowing his actual weakness. Once the clock strikes, he bails. Kinda smart of him that he times his appearance so perfectly that he could use a clock maintained by someone else as an indicator of when he needed to leave. I assume he must have done that on purpose. So Goku chases after him, gets directions from a humanoid pig, and runs off. For the first time in the series, we get a fourth wall break, which happens a lot in the manga, but rarely happens in the cartoon. Here, Oolong talks directly to the audience, explaining that this is his normal appearance, and he can only hold a shape for 5 minutes, which is why he had to bail on Goku. He doesn't actually gain strength when he transforms, though, which is why he had to spend so much time talking smack. Which begs the question of how he was able to smash through the village sign like it was a victory tape at the finish line of a marathon. When Goku returns, Oolong is worried that Goku might ruin a good thing. This makes me wonder, why is this the only village where Oolong can go to pick up women? When we see his house at the end of the episode, it's a huge mansion, and Oolong explains that he ripped off a lot of people in order to raise the money to buy it. So clearly he has other targets and victims besides this one village. Why doesn't he just take his business elsewhere? He decides he needs to come up with a look that would scare even Goku. He decides on a robot samurai and threatens to eat Goku alive. Strangely enough, although he doesn't gain any strength when he transforms, except for when he does, he is somehow able to make a bowl of soup hot enough that it burns his thumb. Is it just me, or are Oolong's powers really arbitrary and inconsistent? So Goku proves how strong he is by breaking some bricks that Oolong just happens to have on hand. You know what? I don't care anymore. So Oolong realizes he can't beat Goku and turns into a bat and flies away. Although he doesn't get stronger when he transforms, he does seem to take on the bat's ability to fly. Apparently, shapeshifting gives you all the powers and abilities of whatever you turn into, except for physical strength. A chase ensues, and Oolong isn't able to lose Goku before his 5 minutes run out, so it's up to Goku to save him from falling to his death. Surprisingly, when he changes back, he apparently stops on a dime in midair, evidenced by how Goku, who's still going full steam ahead, zips past him, and how Oolong then proceeds to fall straight down instead of diagonally.
No. Bad, Toriyama. Bad.
Think about it. When your car stalls in the middle of the road right as you're driving, do you just instantly stop on a dime? Of course not. If you did, you and everyone in the car would instantly be thrust forward, just like what happens when you slam on brakes. Here, when Oolong reverted to his original form, he shouldn't have just stopped on a dime like that. Under Newton's laws of motion, he should have kept going in the direction he was already going, but slowly losing speed because his body is rubbing against the air molecules, while also going diagonally downward. And before anyone says that Newton's laws aren't applicable in this universe, don't. Isaac Newton was indeed a real person in this universe, as evidenced by this line.
Oh boy! Sir Isaac Newton would have never lived to tell about it if one of those apples had hit him.
So Oolong is tied up, his scheme exposed, and everyone demands that he tell them where the girls are. With no choice, he leads them to his home, but it turns out the girls have all stayed there willingly. Since they know Oolong's scheme, they probably blackmail him and threaten to reveal his scheme if he doesn't cater to their every whim. So the old lady hands over the 6-star Dragon Ball, and the episode comes to a close. So Oolong, he doesn't have very much presence outside of this saga, so much so that I honestly believe he should have been written out of the story at its conclusion. After all, if Toriyama had changed his mind and decided he wanted to use Oolong for something later down the line, I'm sure he could have found a way to reintroduce him into the story, just like he'll eventually do with another female character we haven't met yet. Instead, he'll spend the rest of the series standing around in the background, contributing nothing and just being a waste of space. In this saga, however, Oolong does have enough of a presence that I can afford to give him some character analysis. Unlike Bulma, whose promiscuity I spent a good chunk of time defending as an unfair generalization, Oolong is undeniably perverse. There's really not much I can say in defense of his pervertedness, since it's often explicit, and, for that matter, Oolong is often the one who unilaterally tries to solicit sexual favors from Bulma, only to be rejected by her every time. Oolong's shape-shifting power, although it doesn't make him stronger, does make him capable of doing just about anything else his new form could otherwise do, with flying being the most narratively expedient. Bulma takes Oolong along in order to make use of his shape-shifting abilities, although it's blatant slavery. He's literally forced to come along, initially because he thinks Bulma likes him, but it quickly becomes a blatant captive situation. Up until the climax of the saga, Oolong's primary narrative function is to be a straight man to the various antics that Goku is too naive to understand. Since the Dragon Ball gang is just Bulma, Goku, and Oolong up until the final leg, he's the only one who interacts with Goku enough to have these sorts of conversations, while still being knowledgeable enough to understand them. Unfortunately, even though he ends up being instrumental in the climax of this saga, he just isn't a very deep character. This may explain why he's just a background character for the rest of the series. Bulma has her technical expertise, which allows her to be useful at certain points, and Goku has a driven motivation to get stronger, which sets him down a journey which will result in character development and growth. But Oolong, there's just not a whole lot to him. He likes female anatomy, but isn't willing to respect women enough to get an actual girlfriend. Whoop-de-doo! It's funny in this saga, which only lasts for 13 episodes, but there's really only so much mileage you can get out of a character whose entire personality begins and ends with, he's a pervert. Master Roshi certainly has a similar lecherous appetite, but at least he'll quickly get additional character traits beyond that. It is those character traits, not his pervertedness, that serve as the catalyst for his character development and growth. Like Oolong, his perviness will stick around for the entire rest of the series, but no character growth ever comes from it. Oolong doesn't even have the extra character traits. He's a pervert. He's just a pervert, and he never evolves to being anything but a pervert. So even though he is completely useless after this one saga, he nevertheless sticks around as a background character despite having no reason to even be part of the group after this saga. So Oolong comes along. At first, it seems that he's doing so willingly. However, when Bulma reveals that their next destination is at Fire Mountain, he panics. It turns out the name is literal rather than metaphorical, and that the mountain is always on fire. Plus, it's the home of the terrifying Ox King. This is accompanied by images of a thrown battle axe chopping through 3 different mountains in one swift motion. This is a surprisingly impressive display of power. It won't be until the Dragon Ball Z era that we eventually get to villains who can perform this level of devastation for real. So Oolong tries to make a break for it, but Bulma gets him back and then feeds him a brown gobstopper. When they reach the shore, she realizes that they don't have any capsules. Oolong hopes to escape while Bulma is distracted, but when Goku suggests that they have Oolong transform into a vehicle, she notices that he's missing, so she starts calling out, "Piggy, piggy, piggy." It turns out that the brown gobstopper she gave him actually gives him severe diarrhea whenever someone says that. It won't have any effect after this saga though, which makes it all the more baffling that Oolong remains as part of the group, as it's established firmly that he's only tagging along with the group under duress at this point, so you'd imagine he'd leap at the opportunity to go and live his own life as soon as the duress is no longer present. People often ask if Gohan from later in the series has Stockholm Syndrome, but nobody seems to wonder the same thing about Oolong. So Oolong initially transforms into a moped, but gets crushed under Bulma's weight. He explains that shapeshifting doesn't make him stronger, even though that's apparently the only thing shapeshifting doesn't do. And above all, he can only hold a shape for 5 minutes anyway, so Goku's plan of using Oolong for transportation is off the table. The trio end up hoofing it through the desert. Bulma finds shade and takes a nap, so she's conveniently absent for the upcoming sequence of events. A cat named Puar notices Goku and Oolong and reports to her master, who also thinks it's just the two of them alone. He confronts the two, identifying himself as Yamcha, and demands that they hand over their money and dino caps or he'll fight them for it. The protagonists choose to fight, and Yamcha actually puts up a good fight against Goku, which is ironic considering how pathetically he'll be handled for the rest of the series. One of the biggest story revelations in this fight sequence is that Yamcha actually recognizes Goku's power pole. Although he's never seen it, he knows the pole by reputation and instantly connects the dots that Goku is the grandson of Gohan, who was apparently a world-famous martial artist back in the day. This is the first sprinkle of actual development to this world's martial arts culture, and will ultimately pay off gangbusters as the martial arts culture of this world will quickly become the primary focus of the series, almost to the point where other societies in this world become superfluous and don't get nearly any focus. Even the religion of the world will be centered around fighting and martial arts, with defeating an attendant in a match being the way one proves himself worthy to meet God, to saving the world using your super-duper martial arts powers being the primary way you get to keep your body in the afterlife, and even then, the only real benefit to keeping your body in the afterlife is so you can undergo super intensive afterlife training. And it all starts with this little, often overlooked observation in the Yamcha-Goku fight. So just as Yamcha is about to finish off Goku, Bulma wakes up. Yamcha sees her and immediately panics and runs off. It turns out that Yamcha has a crippling fear of women, especially attractive ones, to the point where he completely loses his ability to function around them. This is his character trait that will motivate his actions for the saga. It's also probably the main reason why he lives in the middle of nowhere, because if he lived in mainstream society, he'd encounter women on a daily basis, and so the times when his fear wouldn't be triggered would be rarer than the times when it is. Of course, he still needs food and water to survive, and unlike Goku, who lived in the jungle, he isn't going to find that much food or water in the desert, so he has to resort to robbing people in order to make a living. However, he ultimately joins up with the good guys by the end of the saga, which means he still needs to be redeemable. To ensure he still has some good qualities within him, he is depicted as having a greater sense of honor and morality than most other thieves and robbers. He doesn't ambush his victims, he drives up to them and makes his presence known before doing anything else. He gives them ample time to decide whether to hand over their goods or fight, and when they choose to fight, he once again gives them ample warning, drawing his sword slowly and telling them to get ready. Even after he thinks he's bested Goku, he still gives Oolong another chance to hand over his valuables to avoid being hurt, and even politely thanks Oolong when he almost complies. While these actions don't make what he's doing illegal, he probably justifies it to himself by telling himself that this constitutes honorable combat. When he learns of the Dragon Balls, his wish is to be cured of his gynophobia. He claims he wants to get married, and I'm sure he does, but also being able to function in mainstream society is certainly a plus too. Now, some of you might be thinking that he seems to function just fine in the town that the rabbits are terrorizing, and that episode predates him overcoming his gynophobia. That is true. However, it's also important to note that this town has a heavily Islamic-inspired motif to it, so I'd imagine women are under strict requirements whenever they go out in public, such as wearing burqas. Besides, he spends the majority of that episode hiding and watching the action from afar, so it's not like he's interacting with female townsfolk directly, so my theory still holds. So, once Yamcha is driven off, Oolong reveals that he has a double-decker camper as a dino cap, which gives the trio some decent comfort while they're in the desert. While relaxing, Goku explains the Dragon Balls to Oolong, and Yamcha overhears this. He then hatches a scheme to steal the Dragon Balls, but put simply, it doesn't go very well. Meanwhile, Shu and Mai attempt to plant a bomb on the camper so they can steal the Dragon Balls themselves. The next morning, Oolong reveals that he does have at least one outfit that's Bulma's size, only for it to be a Playboy bunny outfit. Also, Bulma puts on the ears for some reason. I get having to put on the rest of the costume, but why the ears? Anyway, Yamcha attacks the camper with a bazooka, demands the Dragon Balls, and another fight ensues. Since Goku has a full stomach this time, he quickly and easily defeats Yamcha. Remember that part about Goku having a full stomach, because it's going to come back in a later saga, and it's going to be exponentially more stupid when it does. Since he can't take the Dragon Balls by force, Yamcha instead comes up with a better plan. Let the protagonists collect the Dragon Balls, and then swoop in at the last minute and steal them. To facilitate this, he pretends to give them a car, only for this car to have a tracker on it. The next morning, the gang approach Fire Mountain, and Bulma sees that Oolong was indeed telling the truth about the mountain being engulfed in flames. Meanwhile, Yamcha encounters an adolescent girl in a skimpy-ass bikini. Good God, Toriyama, do you have no fucking shame? Anyway, this girl takes out a dinosaur using the super helmet she's wearing. Yamcha knocks her out and then explains to Puar that he isn't scared of little girls because he isn't attracted to them. You know what? Good for you, Yamcha. I can't believe I'm handing out compliments for the bare minimum that is not being a pedophile, but that's what this saga has driven me to. Meanwhile, back at Fire Mountain, Goku calls the Flying Nimbus so he can attempt to get into the castle. While he's away, Ox King appears and confronts Bulma and Oolong. Goku shows back up and fights Ox King, but he can't damage him. Since the two never fight again, this makes Ox King one of the few people who has a perfect win-loss record against Goku. In fact, the fact that he doesn't even flinch when Goku hits him as hard as he can actually makes him even more impressive than Master Roshi. According to supplementary materials, Ox King has a power level in this saga of 900, which would actually make him several times stronger than King Piccolo. Anyway, Ox King immediately recognizes both the Flying Nimbus and the Power Pole. Since we know from the earlier Yamcha fight that the Power Pole is one of a kind, and that Gohan was a world-famous martial artist, the fact that Ox King recognizes these two artifacts demonstrates that he too is part of the martial arts culture of this world. He knows the limitations of this cloud and instantly realizes that he must be wrong about Goku because Goku obviously couldn't ride the cloud if he had stolen it. This seems to contradict my earlier theory that to ride the Flying Nimbus you need only have a single track mind that isn't taken up by more than one priority. However, it's important to remember that Ox King's line, "You couldn't ride it if you stole it," is actually a Funimation-only line. In the original Japanese anime, all Ox King says is that he recognizes Kinto-un, the Japanese name for the Flying Nimbus. So this doesn't mean that Toriyama's vision was that Goku had to be sinless to ride the Flying Nimbus, any more so than the ocean dub of the Saiyan Saga means it was Toriyama's original vision to make Goku's biological father into a brilliant scientist. Ox King quickly turns into a total goofball and explains he was Master Roshi's second student, with Gohan being the first. It turns out that the old hermit who gave away the Cloud and 3-star Dragon Ball is more than just a turtle hermit, but a master of martial arts. More importantly, he has something called the Bansho Fan, which can be used to put out the flames on Fire Mountain. So he wants to find Master Roshi so he can borrow the fan, but he doesn't know where he is. This serves as the next obstacle that the Dragon team needs to overcome in order to get the next Dragon Ball. Hey, if you made it this far into the video, you're obviously enjoying the video. So why not show how much you enjoy my content by throwing some monetary support my way? If you're watching this video during the initial premiere, the quickest and easiest way to throw some support my way is through Super Chats. Even if you didn't catch this video during the initial premiere, Super Thanks should still be available. You can also support me on a recurring basis by becoming a channel member. Those who support me that way get access to my Discord account and my official Discord server, allowing us to chat about anything, anytime. It doesn't even have to be related to video games, Dragon Ball, or my channel in any way. just about anything that may strike your fancy, within reason of course. I am up for a conversation about it on Discord. So what are the benefits of supporting me with donations? Well, in addition to my eternal gratitude, as well as the aforementioned Discord contacts, silver supporters, that is, those who support me with recurring payments of at least $5 a month, are allowed to request video topics from me. I only entertain video requests from those who are supporting me on a recurring basis, for reasons I explain in this video right here. Of course, if you want to be guaranteed to have your video request fulfilled within certain common sense limitations, of course, then you can become a gold level supporter, supporting me with recurring donations of at least $20 a month. When you do that, you get to commission videos from me about specific topics and, subject to certain reasonable limitations, I am guaranteed to fulfill that request. Of course, I want you all to understand that this support is 100% optional. It is much appreciated if you provide it, but if you don't provide it, I think no less of you. Even if you cancel your support later down the line, I will accept that cancellation with grace and thank you for the support you already gave. And to prove it, here are a few testimonials from some of my past and present supporters.
A bit after I became a bronze member of the channel, Acer sent me a message thanking me for my donation and asking what I felt he could do better with this content. It's really cool to have a content creator who engages actively with his fans in this way, and makes the channel feel less like a soulless group of videos and more like an actual community. He's also one of the few creators who doesn't try to guilt you if you have to stop your monetary support, instead just asking you to support the channel in other ways. It's refreshing to have a content creator who treats his subscribers and supporters like individuals and members of a community, rather than just faceless numbers.
If there's one thing that Acer has, it's easily time for his fans, and that was really evident to me the second I decided to donate. Even though it was just $1, he was just really quick to come thank me and was never really against any ideas I had for his channel. It felt really cool to kind of be a part of his channel as it's growing. It was definitely worth it. I would recommend it.
I've been supporting Acerthorn's Patreon for over a year now, not only because he's a great content creator, but also because he's extremely grateful to his Patreons for any and every contribution they make. Even if you join his $1 tier, he will still reach out to you to show his appreciation for your support.
Hi, I'm Verb. Not to take up too much of your time, but I want to talk to you about donating to Acerthorn's channel. I've only recently started doing so now that I have the chance to, and I'm happy with how it's been so far. He's grateful about whatever you give him, and he doesn't ask for much. He doesn't try to keep you donating or pressure you. All he does is just feel grateful if you give him anything. So, if you're feeling a little bit generous and you like the content he makes, you should absolutely go ahead and donate to him.
But even if any and all forms of direct monetary support are entirely off the table, there are still ways to support me. First, pretty please turn off your ad blocker. If you can't support me directly, ad revenue is the only option I have. Second, be sure to leave a like on my videos and also leave a comment. Even if you can't think of anything to say, just leave some kind of comment. You could just say, here's a comment just for engagement. Or you could just say, Of course, engagement helps boost my videos in the algorithm, but remember that views and watch time are still king. So the best way you can support me without money is by binge watching my videos. I have playlists where I separate my videos by topic, so you can literally leave the computer unattended while you give me passive views on the videos that you most care about. Views, watch time, and most importantly, ad revenue. Any and all forms of the aforementioned support, or any combination thereof, are all very much appreciated. Alright, recommencing the video you all came to see in 3, 2, 1. So, Ox King, it's strange that he is built up as this incredible threat, but he becomes a good guy almost immediately. Once he realizes that Goku is already on speaking terms with Master Roshi, he instantly aligns himself with the protagonists. One could argue that this is intentional, like a subversion of expectations. However, that doesn't exactly work here, because the expectations weren't subverted at all. Ox King is absolutely an impenetrable wall. Goku cannot defeat him. So he really is just as powerful as Oolong and Yamcha built him up to be. He just chooses to stop fighting. Really, the closest you can get to an expectation that could be subverted is how ruthless he is. Like, he'll attack anyone who even gets near his castle, but even that expectation isn't really subverted, because he only stops fighting Goku when he realizes he's in Master Roshi's social circle, and thus he can be used as a means to an end for himself. All in all, Ox King is way too much build-up and not enough payoff. Anyway, Ox King asks Goku to retrieve his daughter Chi-Chi so they can search for Master Roshi together. He shows Goku a picture of Chi-Chi, and Yamcha realizes that he beat up Ox King's daughter, so he panics and runs off to make sure she's okay. He finds her still unconscious, and when he wakes up, he pretends to be in love with her so she doesn't shoot at him. When she's distracted by her thoughts of romance, he makes a break for it right as Goku shows up. Chi-Chi gets on the flying Nimbus. In the Funimation dub, she says that she always behaves well because her dad's the Ox King. However, just like last time, this is a Funimation edition. In the original, she just insists that her heart is indeed pure. So I'm still interested in someone in the comments telling me which Japanese word for pure is actually used in this context. As she grabs Goku's tail to try and give herself a boost, Goku is suddenly in extreme pain. He reveals that his tail is his weak point. Yamcha overhears this and suddenly gets confident he can beat Goku. So Goku and Chi-Chi take off on the flying Nimbus, and Goku taps Chi-Chi's crotch with his foot, confirming she's a girl. In the dub, Chi-Chi just thinks to herself that it's a good thing he's cute, but in the Japanese version, she assumes that this is a level of intimacy that means she's pretty much has to marry him. We'll put a pin in that, and we'll come back to it in a couple of sagas when Chi-Chi actually reappears in filler. Anyway, they find Master Roshi's home on an island and negotiate about borrowing the Bansho fan to put out Fire Mountain. Master Roshi agrees, but he asks for something in return. In the dub, he just asks to take Bulma on a moonlight stroll around his island. Pretty banal. But in the Japanese version, he demands that he be allowed to play with Bulma's breasts.
You've got to be kidding me!
Okay, let's rip the band-aid off this shit. We need to talk about this saga and its bizarre obsession with getting laughs out of, and let's call it what it is, pedophilia. Remember that canonically, Bulma is 16 years old at the time of this saga. In their previous encounter, Roshi only asked to see Bulma's underwear. He got explicit nudity, but didn't ask for it. The second time she flashed him, he knew she was going commando, but he didn't ask to be flashed a second time. He just got it. So it's bordering the line, but I'm going to give him just enough benefit of the doubt in that encounter. This time around, however, there's no excuse. So yes, I previously conceded that there are some vast cultural differences that we need to be mindful of. That's why I actually bothered to look this shit up. As it turns out, in 2023, Japan actually passed a new law that made it illegal for any adult to engage in any sexual activity with anyone under the age of 18. Thank fucking God! However, this manga chapter was originally published in the 1980s. Back then, the Child Welfare Act of 1947 was still in effect, which prescribed indecent acts with people under the age of 18. Of course, that doesn't tell us much because we don't know what acts are considered indecent by Japanese standards. In 1985, the Japanese Supreme Court clarified that the law didn't preclude all sexual activities, but it did criminalize, among other things, acts where the juvenile is treated merely as an object to satisfy one's own sexual desires. Which sounds an awful lot like what Master Roshi is doing here, doesn't it? This manga chapter was originally published on February 19th, 1985, so let's assume it just barely predates this Supreme Court case, so Toriyama didn't know about that law. Even still, the Supreme Court obviously took it up because it was, at a minimum, pedo-adjacent by Japanese standards, which means that Toriyama is, at a minimum, dancing an extremely tight line between pedophilia and acceptable sexual content. This would be more tolerable if Roshi were portrayed in the story as pedo-adjacent, like he's supposed to be creepy, but this is all played for laughs, and moreover, he treats all pretty women this way, even the adults, with the show never calling attention to the fact that he does this to underage girls. Even years later, when he and Bulma are preparing to head to the World Tournament together, he's still macking on Bulma. Even though 3, close to 4, years have passed in universe and therefore Bulma is now an adult, the show never actually acknowledges that. The show never acts like, well, at least now his creepy perviness is being inflicted on an adult this time. No, the show instead treats it as same shit, new day. It's just Roshi being Roshi, and absolutely nothing about this situation is any different than the first, second, or 15th time he's done it. Okay, so Bulma's an adult this time around, and your point would be what exactly? What's actually tangibly different this time? But even then, Toriyama somehow has to make the situation even worse if that's possible. You'll notice that Roshi never tries to sexualize Chi-Chi, despite her being objectively more scantily clad than Bulma is, given the fact that she's wearing a bikini. And even though Yamcha acknowledges that she is conventionally attractive, the only reason I can think of for why Roshi isn't attempting to sexualize her is because she's only 12 years old. So let's think about that for a minute. Toriyama appears to concede that there's a line even he won't cross, even for his extremely crude, extremely uncomfortable sense of humor. He seems to understand that if a character is below a certain age, any and all sex talk concerning that character is off limits. And yet, he still makes the conscious choice to portray Roshi as wanting to sexualize and even molest a 16-year-old girl, and instead of portraying him as being entirely over the moral event horizon because of this fetish, he is instead portrayed as reasonably imperfect, reasonably gray-area'd. I say all of that to say this. Thank fucking God the Funimation dub changed it so that all Roshi asked in return was a date. And if you disagree that this is a huge improvement, well then, you're a goddamn pedophile. Then again, I'm a filthy dubtard, and that makes me objectively more evil than an entire ring of IRL child sex traffickers. That's how it works, right? Roshi searches his home far and wide, but he can't find the fan. Turtle ultimately reveals that Roshi threw it away because he was using it as a placemat. All hope seems lost until Roshi volunteers to travel to Fire Mountain and put out the flames himself. I have to wonder if this might be the point where Toriyama had decided to continue the series beyond this one saga. Think about it. It seems kind of weird that Toriyama would introduce the concept of the Bancho fan only for us to never even get to see it. Way later down the line, Goku eventually does find the Bancho fan, only for it not to work at all. That would be a subversion of expectations. But this is just setting up an idea only for it to never even get off the ground. So I would imagine that Toriyama's original intention was for Goku to actually use the Bancho fan. But imagine how the story would have progressed had that been what happened. Roshi would have had no reason to come to Fire Mountain himself, which means no demonstration of the Kamehameha Wave, which means Goku doesn't pull off an impromptu wave, which means Roshi doesn't offer to train Goku, which means that the next saga doesn't get set up. The story would have ended at the conclusion of the Pilaf Saga had they just used the Bancho fan as originally planned. Anyway, Goku and Chi-Chi fly ahead to notify Ox King of the new development. Ox King doesn't believe that Roshi can put out the flames himself, but as soon as Roshi arrives, he suddenly has complete faith in his old master. One thing I find a bit odd is that he bows to Roshi like he's royalty. I get that bowing is a standard greeting in Japan, but that's usually with your arms to the side, legs straight, back straight, and only bending at the waist. Here, Ox King is doing a full-blown royalty bow, where he first drops to his knees, then falls so far forward that his face is touching the ground, with his arms outstretched in the surrender position before they too fall palm first to the ground. Weird. So Roshi confirms that Bulma will agree to go on a short walk with him if he puts out the flames on Fire Mountain.
And that's just it. A walk. That's all he's ever asked for in any language.
And so he climbs on top of the ledge and readies himself. He begins to meditate and he buffs up significantly. Yamcha is watching and exposits that this is Roshi's signature attack, gathering up all the latent energy, or ki, in his body and is about to release it all at once. This happens and Roshi shoots a giant energy laser out of his hands, which Ox King calls the Kamehameha Wave. This puts out the fire, but also destroys the mountain itself and the castle in the process. The Kamehameha Wave, or Turtle Destruction Wave, is the most iconic attack in the entire series, so obviously I need to stop and talk about it for a minute. For some reason, the first ever Kamehameha Wave draws a rough white circle around Roshi's hands right before he unleashes the blast. This never happens again in the entire rest of the series, and it's not even part of the manga either. The anime added that in themselves. I never understood what the point was of this completely random circle around the hands that only appears this one time. This is the first energy attack of the series. This energy is based on the Buddhist concept of ki, and it's even called a ki attack in the original Japanese version. I personally approve of calling it energy in the West, since that makes it way easier for Western audiences, particularly Western children, to understand. If we called it ki in the West, it would probably confuse the kids unless they were given a crash course on what ki even is, which would likely have bored them to tears. Of course, that doesn't mean American kids are dumb, just that they watch these cartoons after school specifically to unwind after school. That's why when this show aired on Toonami in the West in the 1990s, it was specifically given a time slot to perfectly coincide with right after school in the USA. The same could be said about Japanese kids, but at least then, ki was already such an inherent part of their culture that most Japanese kids already knew what it was. No crash course necessary. If they needed a crash course on something, there's a good chance it would have bored them to tears too. Now here's something you probably didn't notice. It's not something you even could notice if you prefer the manga over the anime, but even if you watch the anime, you probably didn't notice this, or at least didn't notice the significance of it. Roshi says the syllables slowly, but Goku says them quickly and only delivers a blast strong enough to blow the tire off the car. Later in the climax, Goku only blasts a tiny hole, but once he actually says the words slowly, he blasts a hole big enough for everyone to escape through. Later on, a character we haven't met yet will attempt to do a Kamehameha and only create a tiny spark, but ultimately creates a big blast when he says the words slowly. This implies that the Kamehameha Wave has to be revved up in order to have maximum effect. So after seeing the attack, Goku asks if Roshi can teach him how to do it. Roshi explains that it'll take 50 years to learn how to do it, but Goku says fuck that and proceeds to unleash a tiny Kamehameha Wave in a random direction, which just happens to be where the car is parked. Ox King and Roshi are surprised, and Ox King explains that Goku is actually Gohan's grandson. Roshi asks about Gohan, hoping to catch up on lost time, only to find out that Gohan actually died a long time ago. This gives Roshi the idea to offer to train Goku himself, setting up the next saga. Meanwhile, Bulma and Oolong are searching among the wreckage for the Dragon Ball. They find it, and then Bulma chews Goku out for blowing up their car. Fortunately, Ox King solves that problem before it can even become a problem by offering up one of his cars instead, even though he clearly wouldn't be able to fit in that car. Chi-Chi speaks to Goku one last time. In the original, she asks if Goku will return and marry her, and Goku, thinking she's referring to some sort of food, agrees. But in the dub, all Chi-Chi asks is if Goku will ever think of her again. This potentially creates a plot hole later down the line, but fortunately a filler scene fixes it. Remember earlier when I was talking about Oolong's character and I said there was another character that Toriyama had written out of the story only to write her back in years later? Well, Chi-Chi is that character. This is the final time in the manga we see Chi-Chi as a kid. Every subsequent appearance of Chi-Chi until we meet her as an adult is anime filler. As I mentioned earlier, Toriyama found a way to write her back into the story, so I see no reason why he couldn't have done the same for Oolong. Since this car doesn't have a tracker on it, Yamcha has to stay close to them in order to avoid losing sight of them. So close, in fact, that it seems inconceivable that the Dragon Ball gang wouldn't have noticed him following them. They eventually stop at a village in the desert for fuel and supplies. There, everyone seems afraid of the protagonists, insisting that they not pay for anything, until Bulma takes off her rabbit ears. At which point they realize she obviously isn't a member of the rabbits. So, do the actual rabbits have their bunny ears surgically implanted into their skulls? We eventually see the rabbits that the townsfolk are actually afraid of, and they proceed to demand their money back from an apple merchant who already gave them apples for free. Although we still don't see why exactly the townsfolk are actually so afraid of them. They eventually come across the Dragon Ball gang, and so Goku beats them up. Once they're writhing in pain, they proceed to call the boss. This sends the townsfolk into a panic. The boss shows up, and he's a humanoid rabbit who initially tries to shake hands with Bulma. Instead of shaking hands, Bulma just slaps his hand away, only to turn into a carrot. Yamcha is watching this from afar and explains that this guy's name is Monster Carrot, and anyone who touches him turns into a carrot. Oolong suggests that Goku use his power pole to fight him, so he doesn't have to touch him, but then he takes the car and drives off, leaving Goku to face Monster Carrot alone. Yamcha realizes that without the Dragon Ball gang, he has no hope of being led to the last Dragon Ball, so he has no choice but to help Goku. He and Puar intervene, and after a brief fight, Goku lands a good whack upside Monster Carrot's head, forcing him to surrender and change Bulma back. Strangely, once Monster Carrot is defeated, Oolong returns of his own accord. This is weird considering that he had the perfect opportunity to escape permanently. Bulma couldn't use the piggy candy to keep him from running off, and it's pretty firmly established that he didn't want to actually be part of the group. So why did he return? Of course, his reasoning for trying to leave initially, that Fire Mountain was too dangerous, has already been resolved, but even then, I'd imagine he'd like to get away from being one piggy chant away from having diarrhea. So now that they've got gas and supplies, they head towards the final Dragon Ball. This is where we finally catch up with the Pilaf gang in the manga. Every one of their appearances up to this point have been filler only. Interestingly, Pilaf says that Monkey Boy and his friends, implying that even this early on, Toriyama knew that Goku was going to be the main character. And this isn't a Funimation edition either. He says mostly the same thing in the Japanese version too, with only slight variation. Bear in mind that Goku hasn't really been very active at this point. At this point in the series, Dragon Ball appears to have an ensemble cast, but if anyone is to be considered the main character of the series so far, it's Bulma. She's the one who actually sets the events of the saga into motion. She recruits Goku and later Oolong, and yet Goku gets top billing. Although Toriyama made a lot of the series up as he goes along, and although he initially wanted to end the series after this saga, he certainly seems to view Goku as the main character even this early on. Anyway, Shu and Mai steal the briefcase with the Dragon Balls in them. Goku chases them down but thinks the mobile suit was the monster and therefore is dead. Because the whole briefcase was stolen, that means the Dino Caps were stolen too. But Goku still has his 4-star Dragon Ball, so there is still hope. However, since the Dragon Ball gang are stranded there, that means that Yamcha has no choice but to join forces with them. This time with no way of hiding it from Bulma. Or at least you'd think that's his only option. But couldn't he just head over to Pilaf's castle by himself? He might be outmatched by Pilaf's forces, but he doesn't know that yet. Well, regardless of the finer details of the matter, Yamcha ends up joining the Dragon Ball gang. They infiltrate Pilaf's castle, Pilaf gang knocks them out with gas, and Pilaf gets knocked out too. They steal the last Dragon Ball and wait for Pilaf to wake up. A bunch of pointless shit ensues, and ultimately the Dragon Ball gang are trapped again, and Pilaf is about to call the Eternal Dragon. Goku uses a Kamehameha Wave to blow a hole in the wall just small enough for Puar and Oolong, as bats, to fly out. Oolong runs up and wishes for the world's most comfortable pair of underwear just in time to stop Pilaf from wishing for world domination. So about Oolong's and Pilaf's wishes. Oolong's primary purpose is to use the wish before Pilaf can, so he wishes for literally the first thing he can think of. In the original, Oolong wished for a pair of panties off a hot babe. In the dub, he just wishes for the world's most comfortable pair of ultra-soft underwear. The story had been building up to this ever since they arrived at Pilaf's castle, having Oolong complain about his pants rising up and his clothes feeling itchy, so it doesn't come completely out of nowhere that he would wish for something more comfortable to wear. It's a shame, then, that he only ever wears these undies over his head. If Pilaf had managed to wish for world domination, I wonder how the rest of the world would have reacted. As I mentioned earlier, the Eternal Dragon tends to grant wishes precisely as the wisher imagined them, rather than resorting to monkey's paws. However, in this instance, the Eternal Dragon says, "Beware, for it will come true." So does that mean that he was planning on a monkey's paw in this instance? He didn't create a monkey's paw with Oolong's wish, but that could have just been due to the wish's simplicity. There's not that many ways in which a genie even could have twisted the wish to screw Oolong over. Compare the Twilight Zone episode, The Man in the Bottle. There were monkey's paws for 2 of the wishes, but the first wish, to repair the broken glass in their display cabinet, had no monkey's paws due to its simplicity. If Pilaf had successfully wished for world domination, would the rest of the world have just gone along with whatever the wish was for? Can the Eternal Dragon even do that? Does the Eternal Dragon even have the power to take away anyone's free will like that? Way later in the series, when a wish is made to return Goku to the planet Earth, the wish can't be granted because Goku refuses to return. This demonstrates that a wish to the Eternal Dragon can't affect anyone who doesn't consent to the wish. When the film theorists did a video on Aladdin and how its wish system works, it was pretty clear in those 2 movies that wishing for political power doesn't do you much good because the rest of the government still retains their free will and even their memories of who the proper ruler is. So I wonder if a similar restriction on the wishes might have been in place here had Pilaf actually succeeded. Well, regardless of what the wish would ultimately have turned out to be, the bottom line is that we'll never know because Pilaf had his wish stolen from him, and he is raging mad as a result. A chase ensues and the Dragon Ball gang are trapped again. Surprisingly, Yamcha surrenders to spare Bulma and Goku, even though they weren't his friends, at least not yet. Yamcha had joined up with them purely for expediency, so why does he care if they get gotten? Well, the short answer to that is because this whole thing is filler. In the manga, we go from Pilaf demeaning that Shuin might capture Oolong to the entire Dragon Ball gang being placed in the other prison cell. Speaking of that cell, I have to wonder, if there's no way out, how did the Pilaf gang put them in there in the first place? Even if the door can only be opened from the outside, shouldn't there at least be a door-shaped outline somewhere to show the entrance and exit? So Bulma explains that they won't be able to go Dragon Ball hunting again for at least another year, because in addition to scattering to random spots on the planet, they also turn to stones for a year. Of course, Pilaf explains that it won't matter to them what happens in a year because the floor and walls are metal and the ceiling is glass. That means it will absorb all the light and heat once the sun comes up and roast them alive. I gotta admit, for a villain who has been a bumbling idiot this entire saga, that is pretty sadistic. Of course, being the bumbling idiot that he is, he still insists that actually putting the heroes in a death trap is preferable to simply shooting them, which if you've ever seen any James Bond movie ever, or if you've ever seen a single episode of the 1960s Batman TV show starring Adam West, you know that this pretty much guarantees that the heroes will escape. As the heroes await their deaths, Puar looks at the moon to soothe herself, which prompts Goku to mention that a monster comes out at the full moon. Up until now, no details at all have been given about Gohan's death. For all we know, it could have been due to natural causes up until now. But now, Goku explains that his grandpa was trampled to death by this monster. However, he slept through the whole thing and he actually got a glimpse of the full moon right after his grandpa told him not to look at it. Bulma also does the same thing, telling Goku not to look at it, and he immediately looks. Naturally, he transforms into a giant ape. So about the Great Ape Transformation, this, more than any other of Goku's traits, will be tied fundamentally to him being an alien. This is the signature transformation of Goku's alien race, and it results in his power increasing tenfold, and it enables Goku to smash through the glass roof without even trying, even though Goku in his normal state wasn't able to smash through it even when giving it his all. According to supplementary material, Goku gains a power level of 100 during his transformation in this saga. But keep in mind that I mentioned earlier that supplementary materials also stated that Ox King has a power level of 900, meaning he presumably could have mopped the floor with Great Ape Goku. However, if we take these as sacrosanct, then that means that Oolong has the exact same power level as Goku, and that Oolong was twice as strong as Farmer with a shotgun. So the accuracy of these supplementary materials is suspect. However, at least in this saga, I'm far less concerned with the power level of the Great Ape Transformation and far more concerned with how it serves the story in this instance. And to that end, it's a huge point against this transformation that it comes entirely out of nowhere. The transformation honestly works better if we assume that OG Dragon Ball is a prequel to Dragon Ball Z, and that it came after the Saiyan Saga, which is how the series actually aired in the States on Toonami. If that were the case, then the audience would already know full well that Goku has this ability, because we would have already seen the heroes and villains invoke the transformation strategically. At that point, we, the audience, would see the transformation coming.
She's looking straight? Oh, I thought she...
Hey, whoa, what are you doing up there?
Just watch.
Whoa! I got it now. Oh my gosh. She was looking at the moon and I'm like, why the hell would you just look at the moon? But I know who's gonna look at the moon next. Oh my gosh!
Watch the moon.
Like, how are they gonna get out of here?
Instead, it feels like Toriyama wrote himself into a corner, putting the heroes into an inescapable prison cell with only a few hours to live. He had to come up with some way of getting them out, so then he realized that he never really gave any details surrounding Gohan's death up to that point, which makes it fair game for him to use it as a means of escaping this room. Now, some of you might ask me, why is it a bad thing that this transformation doesn't have any real build behind it, or any foreshadowing to it? And the answer to that question is because it's a Deus Ex Machina. That's a plot device whereby a seemingly unsolvable problem in a story is suddenly or abruptly resolved by an unexpected and unlikely occurrence. It's generally frowned upon for writers to resolve their stories with a Deus Ex Machina because it tends to rob the protagonists of their agency. When audiences follow along in a story, we typically want to see the heroes use their cunning and resourcefulness to solve problems. Deus Ex Machinas are, by definition, the very opposite of that. To help show you what I mean, let's juxtapose Goku's first Great Ape Transformation against the first time he undergoes the other transformation that his alien race is known for, the Super Saiyan Transformation. First of all, the transformation was first introduced by name in Dragon Ball Z Episode 67, but didn't actually appear until Episode 95. It was built up over the course of 28 whole episodes, so it absolutely did not come out of nowhere. But even discounting that, the Super Saiyan transformation is 1,000 times more thematically satisfying because it validates Goku's worldview over that of his antithesis, Vegeta, another member of Goku's alien race who is a ruthless, cutthroat son of a bitch. Right before he dies, he gives Goku the following advice.
You're going to have to get over your self-heartedness. Do it. Forget about your feelings. You have to. They'll get you killed.
But as it turns out, the opposite is true. Not only do Goku's feelings not get him killed, but they are precisely what give him the power he needs to defeat the villain he's facing at the moment. Of course, it also doesn't hurt that even though the transformation was thrust upon him, it still doesn't rob Goku of his agency. It gave him the power he needed, but he still has to actually use that power to save the day. The power he desperately needed in that moment, but otherwise didn't really care about, but a power which Vegeta wanted for its own sake more than anything else in the universe, yet his ruthlessness, which he thought was the path to success in life, kept him from getting. Contrast that with Goku's first Great Ape Transformation. In addition to it having no build, and in addition to it robbing the heroes of their agency, there's also no symbolism or thematic significance behind it. Remember that Pilaf's attempts to use the Dragon Balls has already been thwarted. The day has essentially already been saved. All the heroes needed to do now was escape. Goku provided that simply by transforming. Literally, as he grows, he becomes too big for the ceiling, causing the ceiling to automatically shatter. Everything Goku does as a Great Ape, on the other hand, is entirely unrelated to the saga that we had just concluded. The heroes suddenly find themselves in an entirely new conflict: how to protect themselves from Goku's rampage without killing or irreversibly harming the boy they've grown to care for. But that has absolutely nothing to do with anything that has come before. The Dragon Balls aren't a factor, nor is Pilaf's revenge. It's like Toriyama had switched gears completely, and now he's telling an entirely different story altogether. Of course, he's about to do that when he sets up the next saga, which will itself be a very different type of story from the current one, training for and then participating in a tournament rather than adventuring around the world in search of some MacGuffins. But at least that shift is justified by the fact that it's a full-blown story arc in its own right. In all future instances of the Great Ape Transformation, the transformation is contained within the story being told. In the next saga, the transformation begins and ends within a single match in the tournament. In the Saiyan Saga, the transformation is instrumental in defeating the enemy. In GT, the transformation is a stepping stone to the next transformation that actually matters. But here, as I've already mentioned, the villain has already been defeated. The story is basically over, and then out of nowhere we have a brand new, never before seen, never before even hinted at conflict about Goku going on a rampage. It just feels duct-taped on, all because there was never any real build or foreshadowing to it. So, as they attempt to flee from Goku, Bulma slips and breaks her ankle. Yamcha is forced to carry her to safety, thereby overcoming his gynophobia of his own accord. Yamcha, Puar, and Oolong decide to head off and lay low until sunrise, when they expect Goku will return to normal, but they have to return because Bulma is trapped under some debris that even Yamcha can't lift. The combined strength of Yamcha and Oolong are able to lift the debris, but Goku is still able to grab her and prepares to eat her. Puar reminds Yamcha that Goku's weak point is his tail, and so Yamcha grabs it. As a great ape, however, Goku is too powerful to be pacified just by that alone anymore. It would probably be like if some tiny bug were to grab Goku's tail in his normal form. The force applied relative to Goku's size just isn't enough to activate the weakness. However, the combined forces of Yamcha, Oolong, and Puar are enough to hold Goku in place. Yamcha then orders Puar to turn into a giant pair of scissors and cut off Goku's tail, which returns Goku to normal despite there being no reason why that would work. Seriously, what made Yamcha think that would do anything good? How did he know it wouldn't just remove the weakness and let Goku rampage all night long? It turns out he's right, but only because he read the script. So because Goku is sleeping naked, Bulma offers her outer vest to cover up his perineal area. This makes me wonder, if frontal nudity for prepubescent boys is socially acceptable in Japan, why do they feel they need to cover it up here? Anyway, the group make a pact never to tell Goku that he was the one who actually trampled his grandpa to death, and they'll actually keep that secret from him for several years. When Goku wakes up, he suddenly can't balance. I guess his tail served as some sort of balancing pole or something. Is there any actual science behind that? Do real-life monkeys lose their balance a lot when they lose their tails? Someone post a comment. Anyway, as he goes to the wreckage of Pilaf's castle, Bulma and Yamcha contemplate their respective wishes and then realize that they had each other's wishes all along. When Goku gets back, he asks to meet up again in a year and search for the Dragon Balls, only for Bulma to admit that she doesn't need them anymore because she has Yamcha. So she instead gifts Goku the Dragon Radar so he can find his grandpa's ball all on his own. Now, some of you might think that Bulma ultimately settling on Yamcha undermines my earlier argument that all she wanted from the Dragon Balls was a good but not perfect man. However, I couldn't disagree more. As Mr. Fusion once said many years ago when he reviewed this saga, he suspects that Bulma is going to wish for
a magically created boy toy to do her bidding.
But again, I disagree. After all, the fact that she clearly abandoned her desire for the Dragon Balls after hooking up with Yamcha, a realistically imperfect person who is absolutely not going to do her every bidding, is a clear indication that this isn't what she actually wanted. Later in the series, when he's discussing the fight between Zarbon and Vegeta, he says this about Bulma.
Bulma assumes Zarbon is the good guy until he transforms again, which shows that Bulma believes that good is naturally beautiful and evil is naturally ugly. Well, it would certainly explain why she fell for Yamcha even as he was trying to kill her group.
No, not at all. I absolutely disagree. From Bulma's point of view, Yamcha is the only man she's met so far who is roughly the same age as her and therefore makes him eligible to be her boyfriend, who actually breaks the aforementioned mold that men only want one thing. Yes, it is true that Yamcha attempted to kill them, not once but twice, but what so many Bulma haters seem to either forget or ignore is that Bulma was unconscious for both of those fights. Now sure, Oolong rolls his eyes at Bulma fawning over Yamcha, but we never really see him sit Bulma down and explain to her that Yamcha was trying to rob and kill them. Goku also knew, but he's way too naive in this saga to know how to explain it to Bulma. I suppose once Oolong said he was saving them from Yamcha, he expected her to take the hint then. But that's a pretty subtle clue, and if he really wanted Bulma to fear Yamcha, he should have been a lot more explicit. Then he gifts them a car so they don't have to hoof it through the desert. And this time there's no way Bulma wouldn't have asked where the car came from off screen, and no way Oolong and Goku could have avoided having to tell her that it came from Yamcha. Sure, it had a tracker on it, but again, none of them know that. Come to think of it, I wonder if they ever learned about that tracker for the entire rest of the series. So from Bulma's point of view, Yamcha provided them with no strings attached transportation when they were stranded in the desert, helped Goku defeat Monster Carrot, and asked for nothing in return, gave them a lift when they were stranded in the middle of nowhere, and even carried her to safety when she couldn't walk, and all the while, he never tried to flirt with her, hit on her, molest her, grope her, or touch her inappropriately once. Now sure, that was due to his gynophobia, but again, and say it with me everyone, Bulma doesn't know that. So from her point of view, Yamcha has been nothing but helpful and nothing but respectful of her boundaries for the entire time she's known him, and as low of a bar that may be, it actually seems to be pretty rare for a man to be like that if her interactions with other males are any indication. So, with their quest complete, it's time for the Dragon Ball gang to part ways. Or rather, for Goku to part ways with the rest of the gang. Goku's going to train with Master Roshi, so he's the only one to split from the group. Yamcha is going home with Bulma in order to be her boyfriend, so he makes sense. And Puar goes wherever Yamcha goes, so she also makes sense. But for some reason, Oolong decides to stay with Bulma, who has only made his life miserable for the entire time they've known each other, and now she has a boyfriend and is off the market, so he's got virtually no chance of getting in her pants. As I mentioned earlier, Toriyama should have just written Oolong out of the story at this point. He has a very nice house to go back to, and he has no significant role for the entire rest of the series, so he's mostly just going to spend the rest of the series standing around in the background and contributing fuck all. Like I said earlier, if Toriyama had changed his mind and decided he wanted to use Oolong for something that only Oolong could do, he could have found a way to write him back into the story, just like he'll eventually do with Chi-Chi. But he doesn't. And so Oolong will spend the entire rest of the series doing nothing, contributing nothing, and overall just being dead weight for the cast. What a waste. And so Goku flies off on the Flying Nimbus, bringing the Pilaf Saga to a close. So the Pilaf Saga. How does the saga as a whole hold up? Well, quite frankly, all the pedo-adjacent humor just kills the saga for me. It would be one thing if Funimation actually stuck to its mid-1990s guns and insisted on uncovering that shit up. But they didn't. They caved to those who insisted that the story just wasn't the same if we didn't get to actually see Goku's 12-year-old dick. At least they kept the change where Roshi only asked for a date from Bulma instead of getting to grope her. But if we take that incredibly distracting thing out of the equation, how does the rest of the saga hold up? Well, honestly, it works much better as a prequel to Dragon Ball Z than as the start of a series in its own right. It sets up many different dynamics that will fully develop over the course of the series, such as the Dragon Balls themselves and Goku's relationship with Master Roshi, but those dynamics have yet to be fully explored in the saga alone. Put simply, this saga lacks any real meat and potatoes to it. Think about it this way. What exactly is the main theme of this saga? Nearly every saga in the series has a clear main theme. I've already discussed one, the conflicting worldviews between Goku and Vegeta about whether or not violence is strength and whether or not compassion is weakness. But nearly every saga has a main theme to explore: destiny versus free will, knowing when it's time to fight and when it's time to talk through your problems, so on and so forth. But here, I can't really put my finger on any definite theme of this saga, mostly because very little about the saga is interconnected. It's just a bunch of stuff that happens. There's no real ideas to be explored. I've seen a lot of people claim that the Dragon Ball gang are mostly selfish and out for themselves except for Goku, and Bulma is hardly any more morally superior than Pilaf. I absolutely disagree. Both Pilaf and Yamcha, prior to joining the Dragon Ball gang, outright steal the Dragon Balls. Even when Yamcha gives them a car, his ultimate plan is still to steal the Dragon Balls once they've collected them. Bulma, on the other hand, never even considers that to be an option. She acquires the Dragon Balls quite ethically. Stop Oolong from terrorizing your village? Put out the flames surrounding your castle? Sure thing. Just give us the Dragon Ball as payment and it's a done deal. Even when she acquires the 3-star ball by flashing Master Roshi, the important thing is that she acquired the ball by convincing its owner to part with it willingly. That alone puts her head over heels the likes of Pilaf. While I do lob a bunch of criticism at this saga, on the bright side, there's plenty of plot crammed into just 13 episodes. You've seen the length of this video, and you're probably thinking to yourself, holy shit, if this guy has this much to say about the shortest saga, just imagine how long the other videos are gonna be. And while I appreciate the vote of confidence, I highly doubt those videos will be significantly longer than this one. That's because, as the series progresses, the sagas get longer and longer, but they only really pack that extra length with more fighting, not more plot. Take later Dragon Ball Z, for example. The fight between Goku and Frieza gets the most flack, but that has a behind-the-scenes reason for why it's so insanely padded that's pretty well documented. So instead, let me use a chunk of episodes that doesn't have that excuse. Episodes 226 through 237, which is part of the Majin Buu saga. Let's take a look at everything notable that happens in these episodes. Episode 226. Dabura appears and begins the fight with Gohan. Episode 227. Vegeta throws a tantrum. Episode 228. Babidi takes over Vegeta's mind. Episode 229. Goku agrees to fight Vegeta. Episode 230. Goku and Vegeta begin to fight. Yeah, agreeing to fight and actually beginning the fight are two completely different episodes. Episode 231, Majin Buu reaches full power. Episode 232, Majin Buu appears but doesn't do anything. Episode 233, Majin Buu actually does something, takes out a single fighter. Episode 234, Majin Buu defeats Gohan and Supreme Kai. Episode 235, Majin Buu eats Dabura. Episode 236, Vegeta challenges Majin Buu. Episode 237, Vegeta sacrifices himself to try and defeat Buu. Those 13 episodes are all probably amounted to about 30 minutes of in-universe time passing. Can you imagine if the Pilaf Saga had the same level of padding that the Majin Buu Saga had? We'd have an entire sub-saga dedicated entirely to Monster Carrot! There'd be one episode where they arrive at the village and everyone is afraid of them. An episode where Bulma finishes her shopping and removes the rabbit ears. An episode where Goku beats up the two subordinate rabbits and they say they're going to call the boss. An episode where Monster Carrot arrives, ending with this image on a cliffhanger. An episode where Bulma gets turned into a carrot. You know what? I think you get the idea. My point is, don't expect the future videos in this series to be much longer than this. The length of these videos is going to be dictated by how much plot there is for me to talk about, not the sheer length of the sagas. So before I finish the video, there's one thing I need to talk about: the intro music. OG Dragon Ball has quite a journey with its opening theme song as it's been adapted in America. Now, this may come as a shock to you, but I don't actually think the original Japanese intro is the worst of them all. No, seriously. However, there's a caveat to that. I only believe it's not the worst because the actual worst is Funimation's attempt to sing the lyrics in English but keep the Japanese instrumentals. In the dub's attempt at this intro, the lyrics make no sense. Yes, it does wait. In fact, when it's literally first introduced, it spends a couple of minutes waiting patiently for Roshi to explain how the cloud works. Why would I search the sky for a Dragon Ball? Dragon Balls are affected by gravity just like any other object, so why would a Dragon Ball be hidden in the clouds? By contrast, the Japanese version's lyrics all make sense, whereas the dub's song says climb aboard because the Nimbus doesn't wait. The Japanese lyric at that point in the song translates into the Earth is one big treasure island, which is fitting for at least the first saga as well as the Red Ribbon Army saga, as it gives promise of adventure. Meanwhile, whereas the dub tells us to search the sky, the equivalent Japanese line, translated into English, describes our journey as including breezing through the sky, which doesn't imply we're looking for a Dragon Ball in one of the few places it absolutely cannot be. However, while I believe the dub's version of this song is the worst, I still maintain that the original Japanese version is the second worst. Slightly above the original Japanese version is, and you're all gonna hate my guts over this, the Harmony Gold intro. Yes, I genuinely prefer the Lost Dub's intro. Not only do its lyrics actually match the show's lore, but they also do a much better job of explaining what the premise of the show even is. The opening line is, "Get that Dragon Ball, but don't you know to make a wish you must possess them all." Yep, that tracks. If I had only one gripe about the Harmony Gold intro, it's the fact that, at least in Season 1, when it says, "Zero is our hero," it's actually focusing on Master Roshi rather than Goku. If you didn't know better, you'd probably assume, just from this intro alone, that this guy is the main character. Fortunately, in Season 2, this section of the intro song was instead taken up by a shot of Goku flying on the flying Nimbus straight into the camera, so what we see on screen matches the lyrics much better. Another huge plus for the Harmony Gold intro is that it actually contains some foreshadowing that the main character is an alien, when it says that the main character comes from far away. Bear in mind that the Harmony Gold dub was published in 1989, and manga chapter 197, the chapter that formally and unequivocally revealed Goku to be an alien, was published in Japan on October 12, 1988. So it is absolutely plausible that the people at Harmony Gold would be privy to this lore by the time they were doing the dub. However, I am a firm believer that if you're dubbing a show into an entirely new language, it's probably best if you just do your own intro song from scratch. There's no shame in changing the audio of a show to better match the culture you're importing into, especially if it makes one of the main characters look like slightly less of a fucking pedophile. To that end, my personal pick for the best opening theme song for OG Dragon Ball is the 1995 Funimation intro. It starts with some narration to explain the premise, just like with the Harmony Gold intro, but it also quickly switches to an absolutely badass electric guitar rock song. This song honestly rivals Rock the Dragon in terms of how much it gets you pumped up and ready for some action.
Danger all around you, villains everywhere. Evil lives around you, keep on searching, but beware.
And for one final point in favor of the 1995 intro, it's short. It's only 1 minute and 12 seconds long. All the other openings are about 30 extra seconds long, and frankly, it doesn't need to be that long. Most American intros are 1 minute long, which frees up time for more important things like plot. So the fact that the 95 intro is shorter than the others while still getting its point across is a huge plus for it. So now it's time for the ranking. Just like Mystere Fusion, I'm going to rank each saga in the series from most to least favorite. Unlike Mystere Fusion, however, I'm not going to tell you which saga goes in which slot. If you've seen either my Splinter Cell or Final Fantasy retrospectives, you already know how this is going to work, but for the newcomers, let me explain it. So far, I've only reviewed the Pilaf Saga, so it stands alone. As I review more and more sagas, I will declare where they stand on the list, by placing them either at the top of the list, the bottom of the list, or in between two previous sagas. This means you won't know which saga is the best or the worst until I've completed the entire series, including GT. So that was my review of the Pilaf Saga. Next time, I'll tackle the 21st Tournament Saga. Can't say how long it'll take me though. Remember that I still have a personal life, including a job, and it'll take me a long time to watch the episodes, take notes on everything, write a script, and then edit it down to a video for your consumption. But I will get it done. In the meantime, however, I am Acerthorn, and I will see you guys later.